Well, the beautiful thing about Dr. Goodall, who's inspired Tanara and so many people for so long, is that when you commit yourself to saving one species, be it the chimpanzees or the monarchs, you can't help but save so many others. Because those forests, those trees, those wetlands, those habitats, those jungles, they're home to thousands and thousands of other living, beautiful things. What do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to be a paleontologist.
And so, the next people who will join us on stage will be Dr. Jane Goodall and Giselle Fernandez. Thank you, Tanara. Thank you so much. Here we go. So will you join me in saying, welcome,
Dr. Welcome, Dr. Jane Goodall.
Good afternoon, everyone. I can't tell you what an honor it is to be here to amplify the amazing work of the Sierra Club, and what an honor and a privilege it is for all of us to be here with you, Dr. Jane Goodall. And we welcome you to Los Angeles as you are about to celebrate 91 years young in 2 days on April 3rd. Happy birthday. And when we watch and see video of you in your 20s in Tanzania, just starting out, on this birthday, when you look back, 65 years in the Gombe Park, what stands out most to you, top of mind, that should be a priority for all of us as you look back to this moment now?
Well, I think, that one thing, I've lived so many years on this planet, and I've seen such change. And some of it is for the good. There are far more people today who understand that animals like us have personalities, minds, and emotions, that we're not, as once was believed by Western science, the only beings with those attributes. And there are more animal welfare groups. Science has really changed to try to understand the way that the universe, the planet works. But there's been some changes, unfortunately, in the other direction, which we've been hearing about with the other speakers before us now. And there, right now, with the current administration, it seems that many safeguards that were put to protect the environment are being overturned.
Your Vote for Change, your Vote for Nature campaign, how can we leverage that here at this moment when the administration is rolling back so many environmental protections, slashing jobs at the EPA? There are science deniers now at the forefront. There are industries that do not embrace these reforms for monetary and budgetary reasons. How do we leverage what you've done to make change here, right now?
I think, people need to understand that every day each one of us lives, we make some impact on the planet, and we get to choose. And I think we need to use our voices, not in aggression and not in anger, but in trying to speak the truth about what is happening, and to try and persuade people to think not about what's happening only just now, but the future. How will this world be when a child is born now, when this little girl, when she's the same age as me? What will the world be like? And what the world will be like depends on us now, depends on us having a voice and speaking out what concerns us, not being afraid.
You have always said that one individual alone, especially then when working in community-centered conservation, can make a difference. But to so many who feel overwhelmed with these setbacks and headwinds, what do you say to motivate them that they can make change?
Well, first of all, we have this saying, think globally, act locally, right? It's the wrong way around. When you start thinking globally, you are a little bit overwhelmed. It is overwhelming, and we can't save the world. But I say to them, think about what you care about. Think about what you can do in your community, your little area where you can make a difference. What do you care about? The trash that's lying around in the streets? Do you care about homeless people? Do you care about the plight of stray dogs? Whatever it is, think about what you can actually do. Perhaps persuade some friends of yours to help you, and you will see that you actually are making a difference. That'll make you feel good. So you want to do more, and that will inspire more people. And then, there's one way in which modern technology is really helpful, so we can get news all around the world. We can know what's happening. I wish we didn't in Gaza and places like that. But at the same time, we now know that all around the world, there are people just like us who want to make a difference, and that inspires you even more. And then you dare to speak globally. Think globally, I mean.
Your brand of advocacy was really transformational. It was obviously science-based, but you became the story and the heroine. There were very few women in the early 60s in the field and expected to contribute to any meaningful science. And I want to take us back because your journey is part of what has inspired and infused so many to want to follow in your footsteps and awaken to the wonders of the natural world. You were born in England, you said, to a poor family, your parents divorced, and then you were raised by a bevy of women, your mother, your grandmother, your great aunts. How did they influence you and shape you and your dreams to do what you do today?
Well, the thing is, I was actually born loving animals. Even when I was 1.5, my mother told me. I don't remember, but apparently I took a whole lot of earthworms to bed. And so many mothers would be angry. And she said, Jane, I just think you were looking at them so intently. I think you must have been wondering, how do they walk without legs? So,
well, is it true that you also would, at 4 years old, would hide in the hen house and wait and watch and observe how the hens laid eggs?
Yes, for about 4 hours until a hen came in, because I'd been given the job of collecting hens' eggs, and I kept asking everybody, but where's the hole? Where does the egg come out? And nobody told me. So I distinctly remember this hen going into this little hen house where they slept at night and waiting, and 4 hours. And that was the value of my mother, and I really attribute a great deal of what I've been able to do to her wisdom. So she'd been about to call the police, but when she saw me, she sat down to hear this story about a hen laying an egg. So that was the making of a little scientist, asking questions, curiosity, not getting the right answer, deciding to find out for yourself, making a mistake because I crawled after the first hen who flew out with squawks of fear, not giving up and learning patience. And a different kind of mother might have crushed that early curiosity, and I might not be sitting here today.
And you have also said that there was no one really in your early life that said, especially from your family or your mom, that said, no, you're a girl and girls don't do this. You were given the freedom to explore. And what you say was a calling, to fulfill a calling. You said you read Tarzan when you were a little girl, and from that book, you wanted to always go to Africa?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd saved up my pennies. It was during World War II. And all books either came from the library, but I'd found this little second-hand bookshop, and I had just enough money. There was no TV back then. and no films about Tarzan. So the book was my first introduction to this glorious Lord of the Jungle. And what did he do? He married the wrong Jane. So I knew there wasn't a Tarzan, but that was when my dream began. I would go to Africa, live with wild animals, and write books about them, because no thought of being a scientist. And everybody laughed at me. How will you do that? You don't have money. True. Africa's far away, and we know it's a dangerous place. That was true back then. And you're just a girl. Girls don't do that sort of thing. But Mum said, if you really want to do something like this, you're going to have to work really hard, take advantage of every opportunity. If you don't give up, I'm sure you'll find a way. I take that message to young people everywhere, particularly in disadvantaged communities.
And you did. You worked as a waitress and you worked as a secretary, saved up your money to go to Africa, visited a friend, and there you met the renowned anthropologist, Dr. Louis Leakey. And he was thrilled you didn't have an academic background, a traditional scientist's background, because you would approach everything with an open mind, and he encouraged you to study chimpanzees in Gombe. What did that mean to you at the time? You were in your 20s.
Yeah, well, I was obviously really, really excited and living with animals, writing books, but to be offered the chance of being the first person ever to study wild chimpanzees, our closest living relatives in the wild, it was beyond my wildest dreams. So really, really exciting.
And you were alone so much of the time. That's what struck me in watching your documentaries and reading your books. You were alone, you got malaria, you had to hike, for miles in the bush with all those creatures all around you. Never afraid. You always felt that you were meant to be there.
Yes, and I've also felt that if I didn't hurt the animals, they wouldn't hurt me. So people said, well, that was stupid. I said, well, why was it stupid? They didn't hurt me.
There were two encounters that really touched me, and it is a kind of central tenet of your advocacy. Your advocacy is not based in confrontation, it's in sharing stories and in the beings and in the personalities that you saw and shared with all of us that touched our heart. And one of the first early encounters that I saw you had with a young baby chimp that was ripped from its parents, its mother, killed by poachers, presumably, in a cage, and you locked eyes with that little creature, and you went and touched its hands. It brought me to tears. Tell me how that impacted you and your desire to do the work that you did.
Well, that happened some years after I began studying the chimps, and it was in the big market in Kinshasa, in Democratic Republic of Congo. And this little chimp's mother, they shoot mothers simply to steal babies very often, to sell them in those days for medical research and circuses and pets. And this little chimp had a rope around his waist, and he was lying on his side. He was only about 1.5 on a little cage in the marketplace. Big, tall Congolese laughing around him, hot sun, and his eyes were glazed. I thought he was dying. So I went over and I knelt down and I gave the little soft sound chimpanzee greeting, like that. And to my amazement, he sat up, he looked into my eyes and reached out a little hand. And that started our whole sanctuary program, because you can't put those little guys back in the forest. They need their mother till they're at least 8 in chimp society. So it started our sanctuary program.
And that sanctuary program was the only one of its kind and made such incredible advancements, not only in saving the chimpanzees, but you went on to pass laws and regulations and educate the communities of how to care and how we're integral into the ecosystems. We all play a part. The other obvious chimpanzee that made such a difference was David Greybeard. After months and months, when you first were in Gombe looking for a wild chimpanzee, you finally spotted this leader of the male community, and he let you in. How special was that for you?
Well, it was actually, I had money for 6 months. And for 4 months, the chimpanzees would look at me and disappear. And then this one, David Graybeard, who's really handsome and had white hair on his chin, and he began to let me get a little bit closer. And then on this very special day, I saw him sitting on a termite mound, breaking off grass stems, using them to fish for termites and biting them off. And sometimes he picked a leafy twig, had to carefully remove the leaves to make a tool to fish for termites. At that time, Western science believed humans and only humans used and made tools. So this made headline news. A lot of the male scientists didn't want to believe me. Why should we believe her? She hasn't been to college. Maybe she taught the chimpanzees. I mean, that would have been really clever. But you know, then the National Geographic stepped in at that point, and then they sent a filmmaker, Hugo van Lauwijk, who became my husband, and his film started moving around. And, you know, finally this corroborated everything I was saying, that chimps have personalities, minds, and emotions.
That's why Dr. Leakey wanted you to be there with an open mind.
Yes, yes. But, you know, when after 2 years with the chimps, or 1.5 or something, Leakey made me go to Cambridge University. He said, we've got no time for an undergraduate degree. I've got you a place to do a PhD. And in ethology, I had no idea what ethology meant. No Google in those days, just studying behavior. And imagine how I felt when I got there. I was nervous. I was told I'd done everything wrong. Shouldn't have given the chimpanzees names. They're your subjects. They should have numbers. And you can't talk about them having personality, mind, and emotion. Those are unique to humans. But I had this amazing teacher when I was a child who taught me that in this respect, those professors were talking rubbish. That was my dog.
But how did you confront those headwinds as, I presume, among the few women there, and here are these scientists with all these lofty degrees? How did you know to stay true to your own knowing?
Well, because of Rusty. I mean, I knew that they were wrong, but I didn't confront them because I'm not that sort of person. I just quietly went on writing about the chimpanzees for my thesis, the way they are. And then Hugo's film started circulating.
And you got on the cover of National Geographic, and you became a superstar like the Jane, the Tarzan, female Tarzan. And they would start to talk about your beautiful legs and your looks. How did you confront all of that?
Well, I mean, okay, if somebody said, oh, you're only on the cover because of your legs, you'd probably be sued, right? But back then, all I wanted to do was get back to continue with the chimps. So, well, if my legs are getting me the money to do it, thanks, legs.
Yeah.
and they were nice legs, right? You look on the cover of Geographic.
You actually, it's very interesting because you didn't seek fame for sure. You were passionate about the work you were doing, but you understood very early on how the fame and the storytelling could actually benefit you and getting grants and getting awareness, didn't you?
Well, it was, you know, I always say there's two Janes, and the second Jane began when the first person came up to me in an airport and said, could they get a signature? And I hated it. I put dark glasses on, let my hair down. They still seemed to recognize me because of Geographic, of course. And so it was at a certain point that I thought, well, this has happened. It must be for a reason. I must use it. So I started handing out little brochures, telling people about the Jane Goodall Institute and our youth program, Roots and Shoots. And it's helped to grow these programs around the world.
Yes, magnificently so. And as we saw with the young, beautiful girl who introduced you, you've inspired so many young people with your Roots and Shoots program in more than 60 countries, millions of young conservationists educated now. And into their advocacy to protect the planet for generations to come. How important is that program? When you look at your legacy, where does that stand?
Roots and Shoots, I believe, is the greatest hope for the future, along with other similar programs. But Roots and Shoots is the only one that deals with people, animals, and the environment. It's the only one where young people choose the projects they care about, and then they discuss what they can do, roll up their sleeves, and take action. And so from the beginning with 12 high school students in Tanzania, it's now in 75 countries and growing. Yes, you're right, it was in 65, but now it's in 75, since you read that. And we have members in kindergarten and through university, and it's growing all the time. And what we're growing is compassionate, caring citizens for tomorrow. They won't all work in conservation, but they can all help the planet every single day. And, you know, at one time people were saying, oh, Root and Shoot is growing tomorrow's leaders. They won't all be leaders. I mean, not everybody even wants to be a leader, but we can grow, and we are growing, caring, compassionate citizens in 75 countries.
You talked about Hugo van Lauwijk, your husband and father of your son, Grub. And when he came, you were not thrilled that he was invading your private space in the Gombe, and you were resistant to it. In fact, you had said early on you really had no interest in marriages and children. You wanted to live with the animals. But that marriage just seemed like such an incredible excursion and partnership for you. How did it transform with his films, your work, and your lives together? How did you manage marriage and motherhood with everything else you were doing?
Well, actually, it was quite easy, because when Grub was born, by the way, the original name is Grublin.
Grublin.
Because we had a little chimp who was always covered in leaves and messy and banana and stuff. And when Grub was being weaned, which he hated, he would throw his baby food all over himself. So the little chimp was called Goblin. So it was Goblin Grub and Grublin Gob. That's how he got his name. And his email address is Grublin. But anyway, until he was 6, 7, he was with me at Gombe. We homeschooled him, and every morning I went up to see the chimps. We had a feeding station back then, and every afternoon was his. And he was with me every single night until he was 3, and then I only went away for a week. When he finally went to school at 8, he went to England, but he was with my mother. It was like an extended family. And every summer, I went out to Africa, and in the autumn and spring, he came. No, I went to UK. In the summer, he came out to Africa. So we were together basically all the time.
You often have said that the chimpanzees, especially one beautiful mother named Flo and her baby Flint, that you watched from the very birth of this beautiful baby chimpanzee, and watching the mother and child bond was very impressionable to you. How did that mother-child bond and learning from Flo impact the way you mothered?
Well, there were 3 things that helped me raise my son. One was my own mother. One, I don't know if you remember the days of Dr. Spock,
Yeah.
but he wrote all these books about child raising, and a lot of it I found really, really useful. And then from Flo, I learned I'm going to have fun with my baby, just like the mother chimps do. And, you know, she used to lie on her back and dangle. She would hold little Flint's wrist with one foot and tickle him till he laughed, because chimps, that's how they laugh. And so I would hold Grub up with my feet and tickle him, and he laughed, little boy laugh. And, you know, I had fun with him. Like, she used to chase her children around a tree, because young chimps stay with mum all the time till they're about 8, and then they keep coming back for the rest of their lives.
It was such an idyllic period for you, and you get to see the full cycle of life. In human society, we tend to hide death, but it's so prevalent and in the natural world. You saw it differently and allowed us to view that cycle differently. And when Flo did die, to see the grieving of Flint, who would then later also, not much later, pass away. Talk to
Straight
me.
away, he died of grief.
Died of a broken heart.
He never left her body. It was tragic.
Talk to us about what you learned from watching that whole thing transpire, from the birth to the mothering and to the death and to that tragic ending for Flint. Because you did mention at one point that perhaps Flo could have done a better job teaching Flint to become more independent.
Well, normally the mothers do, and the kids resent it, and they whimper and scream when they're denied riding on the back or suckling, although they continue to be allowed to sleep with mum in her nest until the next baby is born. Flo weaned Flint, we now later realize, too early. And he was, instead of being about 5 or 5.5 or even 6 when he was weaned, he was only 4.5. So he threw tantrums. And when the new baby was born, he desperately continued to sleep in nest with mum and baby. And so but when the new baby died, when Flo was sick, afterwards she took him back as her baby. And so he just remained dependent. He rode her back until she literally couldn't support him anymore. She must have been about 60, which is very old for a Gombe wild chimp.
And after Flint and Flo died, the community literally fell apart and kind of devolved into warfare. And you had said from your observations that you understood where we human beings have that in our DNA to, yes, have compassion and community and reverence, but also violence. What did you most learn about us watching that society make that trajectory?
Well, in the early 70s, the behavior, aggression became politicized. It's strange, isn't it, how things become politicized, like climate change today, which is tragic for all of us and for the planet. Anyway, so there was this big division. Is a baby born with a clean slate and learn aggression, or is there some kind of instinct that enables young people to become aggressive when certain situations? And from watching the chimpanzees, knowing we had a common ancestor 6 million years ago, seeing the similarities, they kiss, embrace, hold hands, pat one another, and then can show altruism and compassion, but also, as you say, violence. So that's why Leakey sent me, because he searched for remains of early humans. And from a skeleton, a skull, a fossil, you can tell a lot about, the creature upright, wear on the teeth, what sort of food did they eat, but behavior doesn't fossilize. And so he reckoned if we had a common ancestor, ape-like, human-like, about 6 million years ago, then chimpanzees went on their evolutionary path, we went on ours, and he argued that if Jane sees behavior similar or the same in chimps and humans today, that probably originated in the common ancestor all those years ago. And so aggression has come with us and with them from that common ancestor.
Mm-hmm. You spent so much of that time, that revolutionary time, transforming our understanding of primates and human involvement and how we impact their worlds, their forests. But then because of Hugo, when you were still married, you started going off to join him in his work too in the Serengeti. And it widened your world and your knowledge of other animal species. How did that expand your embrace of your advocacy?
Well, actually, I got landed with chimps, but I would have studied anything. And
You
so
got landed.
at Gombe, there are chimpanzees, there's baboons, there's monkeys, there were mongooses, and all kinds of. I always wanted to help all of them. So the Serengeti just enlarged the number of animals that I could become passionate about after I met them. But I met many of them even before Gombe, because Leakey took me to one of his digs at Olduvai on the Serengeti. And one evening, the other girl and I were allowed to walk out, and all the animals were there. And one evening, there was this young male lion, fully grown, with mane on his back. He was about as far away as the wall over there, no, not much further. And he was gently waving his tail, and I think he was just curious. So Gillian wanted to hide in the undergrowth, and I said, the lion will know where we are. We won't have a clue where he is. I said, no, we must walk up from the gorge onto the plain, which we did. And Leakey said that was exactly right. And I think that evening around the campfire, he decided I was the person he'd been looking for, he said 10 years.
Wow. Yeah. What an incredible mentor he was for you.
He
right?
was.
Yeah.
But he never came to Gombe. Nobody told me what to do when I got there. Like Lillian said, I just had a pair of binoculars, pen or pencil, because it often rained, little notebook. And Lillian, no, I did not have a typewriter to start with. I couldn't afford one. It was just I wrote it all out by hand every single night.
You went on to expand the Gombe Park and the observation of wild chimpanzees and all the programs, the Jane Goodall Institute, and its incredible programs, advocacy, education, the magnificent work that it does, the Chipanga Sanctuary, your 3 islands. There was one, and I say this because I think it's a tenet of your advocacy, the sharing of these stories, that we got to know some of the relationships you had with the animals. That's what's been so inspiring to so many, as opposed to just scientific research, which is also important. But the way you brought life and humanized our connection touched our hearts. And they always say, people will forget the facts, they'll never forget how you make them feel. And you made us feel compassion, and that has made such a huge difference, I think, in conservation and in your work. But there was one trip, I think it was to Chipanga, where you were releasing this old male, and you didn't know him, you said. But when he got out and looked at what was now before him, freedom, he turned to you, and he had just met you, and he gave you the longest hug. And I wanted to ask you, do you think he knew that you were responsible, even though he didn't know you? Was there some kind of knowledge that he had?
Well, I don't want to correct you, but it was a
Please do.
female.
It was a female, please.
But no, exactly what you just asked. One of his caregivers, you've muddled me. One of her caregivers actually said afterwards, how did she know that lady was responsible for rescuing her? And she was, she arrived really, really sick. We have this wonderful veterinarian, Rebecca Tansia, who saved her life. And she should have hugged Rebecca, not me. But, it was this extraordinary embrace. And it was very, very moving. And it's just one of the stories of some kind of empathy that I seem to have with animals, especially dogs.
Dogs, too?
My favorite animal is a dog.
Spelled backward says it all, doesn't it?
Well, remember, it was a dog who was my teacher as a child. A very special dog. No time to talk about him now, but and I've always loved dogs, and dogs do so much for us. They are our best friend.
They are our best friends. I noticed that you brought Mr. H here, and I was going to ask you about Jubilee, your first stuffed chimpanzee toy when you were a baby. But you said no, he is in a bulletproof cage or a case in the Jane Goodall Institute?
He's with the National Geographic exhibit of Becoming Jane, which is touring America. It opened first in D.C. I'm not sure where it is now, but that's where Jubilee is. This is Mr. H. And, I've already said that the Roots and Shoots program, young people are my main hope. But another reason for hope is what I call the indomitable spirit, the people who tackle what seems impossible and won't give up. And Mr. H was given to me by a man called Gary Horn 34 years ago. This guy's 34 years old. And he thought he was giving me a stuffed chimpanzee for my birthday. And I reached out and took his hand and made him hold the tail. Gary, chimps don't have tails. So Gary went blind when he was 21 in the US Marines. And he decided for some odd reason to become a magician. Everybody said, but Gary, how can you be a magician if you're blind? And the children don't know he's blind. He sets out his props ahead of time. And then at the end, he'll tell them and he'll say, something may go wrong in your life. You never know. But if it does, don't give up. There's always a way forward. And he does skydiving. He taught himself to paint. And I have an amazing portrait of Mr. H, whom he's never seen, but only touched. And when I told him, this isn't a chimp, he said, never mind, take him where you go and my spirit's with you.
Ah, beautiful. And your other little friend?
Well, I really have, when so many people still don't understand how intelligent animals are, how emotional they are. And rats don't have a very good reputation, right? But I have this rat. He represents the giant forest rat of Africa. All rats have an amazing sense of smell. And these rats, and I've watched them being trained, they can detect landmines buried under the ground after one of Africa's long civil wars. They're now being trained to climb up the crates in the ports and the airports to sniff out ivory, rhino horn, pangolin scales from this illegal animal trafficking. And one of those rats that I watched, she was just beginning her training. She was just a little wee baby. And they've called her Little Jane. And
Your namesake.
so, yes. So the program is called Apopo. And Little Jane is up for adoption so that she can be cared for the rest of her life. And it's only $9 a month. Anybody can afford for 1 month to adopt Little Jane. And oh yes, so then I've got a cow because cows endure unbelievable suffering when they're being bred for giving us milk in these factory farms. Chickens too, when they're laying eggs. That's why I became vegan. And cows on their own, if they're free to do so, they have very, very strong bonds with their young. But in factory farms, the baby is born. To get the milk to flow, the baby must suckle. That makes a bond immediately. And then as soon as that bond has been formed and the milk has come down, the baby is taken away. And the calls of distress between mother and child, it's terrible. And then I also have Piglet, and Piglet represents a pig in South Africa. And you may have seen her. Her name is Picasso. She loves to paint. Her paintings are selling for more than $5,000. And the great thing is that as soon as she gets a paintbrush in her mouth, she's off like this, painting like this. When she actually died, and so I was there the day before I was there, she died, and so everybody was really, really upset in this little sanctuary. So I said, why don't you start an academy for animal artists? Because dogs can paint. We've seen pictures of that. I've seen a horse painting. So the first member of this academy is a sheep, and her paintings are beautiful. And then this is Houdini, and Houdini is an octopus. Some of you must have seen my octopus teacher.
Yes.
Yes. So, octopuses are so amazingly intelligent.
And you share these stories, and it shifts culture and allows us to see the animals as human beings or beings.
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 They're better than us very often.
But how do you change culture when you talk about what we do to the cows and milking and cattle and how we see them as subspecies with no emotions that don't need to be cared for properly as part of our ecosystem? How do you change culture? You've said that we're too focused on materialism, consumerism, immediate gratification. Through your advocacy in Africa, you've changed culture. How do we change culture?
Well, we get our children into Roots and Shoots, which is all about understanding animals. And, you know, sometimes people take animals into schools in inner city areas. And we tell stories. And social media, you know, if you go to YouTube, there's so many amazing examples of animal intelligence, animals having fun and playing. It's getting a bit difficult because some of them now are AI, and I don't know how you sort out which is which. And my son seems to know. He says, "No, Jane, that's real." I mean, there was you can look it up. It's an amazing video, and it's also been written up in a scientific paper of a mouse resuscitating a mouse that looked dead, bringing it back to life, pounding on its chest, and even getting the tongue and pulling it out to free the airway. It's quite extraordinary. So animals are just, you know. So once my granddaughter in Tanzania, she's teaching Tanzanian children about who animals really are. And so I'm sending her as many of these videos as I can, because that's the best way. Children say, "Oh, I never knew that. I never knew a donkey could be a friend. I never knew," you know, they're just amazed. So it's telling stories, I think.
Telling stories, yeah, touching the heart. You happen to be in Los Angeles after the most historic and devastating wildfires have ravaged our communities, the Eaton Fire, the Palisades Fire, thousands of homes destroyed, ecosystems destroyed, biodiversity loss, displacement of so many of our wildlife. Tanzania has experienced raging wildfires of destruction. What can we learn of your conservation methods there that we can apply here and should?
Well, I'm not an expert in, you know, how we deal with wildfires. We know that the climate change is having an effect. So you get a lot of rain, which makes a lot of growth, and then you get a drought, so everything's dry, and then a fire starts, and the science says, you know, the strange winds that blow it up, and then the embers fly in the wind and start it growing. So that's not my expertise, but you know, when I've met people here who've lost their homes, and I was following it very closely, and it's such a tragedy. But then, you know, think of the people in Gaza. They lose their homes. They have no help. They're just left with literally nothing. And then, all excited because there's finally a ceasefire, they go back to their homes. They're flat rubble. And then on top of that, they're bombed.
You have, though, stressed that we not only have to address the challenges of environmental concerns, but simultaneously the socioeconomic issues that face us too, that they're all interconnected. And you have programs at the Jane Goodall Institute that really addresses this. Simultaneously, you have said that, you know, if people have enough to eat, they won't cut down the last trees, they won't poach or kill or hunt. Talk to us about the importance of that interconnected approach, simultaneous approach to address these issues.
Well, you know, I actually often see humanity at the mouth of a very long, dark tunnel. And right at the end, there's a little star. That's hope. But it's no good sitting at the mouth of the tunnel and hoping the star will come. We've got to roll up our sleeves and climb over, crawl under, work around all these obstacles, climate change, loss of species, industrial farming, use of pesticides, herbicides, artificial fertilizer, and unsustainable livelihoods. And poverty so often gets left out. But when you're really poor, they destroy the environment to survive, to make money from charcoal or timber, clear more land so they can grow more food for growing populations. In cities, buy the cheapest junk food, they can't afford anything else, and almost always that junk food is made with absolutely no regard for the environment, which is why it's cheap. And so it's when you think of it like that you begin to understand. Fortunately, every single problem that we see that we have to climb over or crawl around, there's a group of people working to try to solve it. And the one big difference between us and animals, we have this use of words. So we can tell everybody here about something they knew nothing about because we have the words to do it with. We can bring people together to have discussions. So although there are groups of people working to solve everything, they're so often working in a silo. And, you know, a very simple example would be a group, yes, we've closed this coal mine, fantastic, all those CO2 emissions are no longer going into the environment. But if they were thinking holistically, they'd be thinking, oh, but all these people are going to lose their jobs. But there are organizations that teach people new skills when their industry closes. So if they thought holistically, approached that group of people to teach the miners before they lose their jobs, you know, then win, 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 win. But I think we're going to need an awful lot of people to advise people on how to get new jobs after this devastation of so many people in the federal government who've lost their jobs.
Well, let me ask you, with, you know, we have 65 years of history of your amazing work, the To Care program we heard about today, which is all community-based conservation efforts. But what gives you hope and keeps you motivated when you see federal jobs being slashed, you see the EPA being almost, you know, left with very little? California is one of the most progressive states in terms of environmental regulations and reforms, being challenged right now by the new administration. Funding will be withheld unless, you know, these regulations are dropped. What keeps you motivated and hopeful that we can really exact change?
Well, you know, just before I answer that, we also were victims when USAID was closed because the major part of the Takari program was funded by USAID. So it's gone like that. For the next 4 years, $5+ million gone. And it's a blow. So what does it do? It makes you, okay, I'm not going to be defeated. Makes you want to fight harder. And also, I'm a very obstinate person. And I will not be defeated by the kind of people causing these problems today. And what gives me hope, I've already said the young people, because they are changing the world. 75 countries. We've got, for example, over 1,500 groups right across mainland China. I just was there. And, you know, we're growing in the Middle East. We're growing fast in South America. We're all over North America and Canada, Europe, moving further to the east, and of course Africa and Asia, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, so on. So we're growing everywhere, and everywhere the young people, it's like this is the time when they need something like this. They need to get active. They need to see that they can indeed make a difference, and then know that in all these other countries are just like them, this family. We call it a family. And they find it. They go to a new country, they find a group of roots and shoots, and they've told me, it was like finding my family, even though we didn't know the same language. We had the same vision and the same goal and the same determination and the same respect, and et cetera, et cetera. So that gives me hope. The indomitable spirit, the people who tackle the impossible and won't give up, that gives me hope. this intellect, this makes us more different from other animals. Yes, they're way, way, way more intelligent than people used to think. But, I mean, we've concerned, I'm not sure I like talking about space travel right now. Because but anyway, it is a pretty amazing thing that we can put people on the moon, even if we, well, never mind. Um, but, you know, and we've designed the internet, which can do a lot of good. But people are beginning to create technologies that do allow us to live in greater harmony with the natural world, like renewable energy, for example. And we are moving in that direction now. Science in this country, but don't forget, America isn't the only country in the world, and other countries really applaud their scientists. And my guess is that many American scientists will move to other countries where they're appreciated, where they can continue with their life-saving, like destroying the NIH. Anyway, so the brain, and then the resilience of nature, that was well illustrated by Lillian. All the bare hills, the vegetation came back. And there are so many animal species on the brink of extinction which can, given a chance, come back. And it's happening.
And you actually speak a lot about nature-based solutions. What can we most learn from nature about healing our planet?
Well, somehow we have to get a different mindset and get away from what you just described as the materialistic money, money, power, money, power, money, power. And it was very interesting. There was an experiment done with, I can't remember how many migrant families, but they all came in as a couple, the ones that were chosen. And so I think there were about 6, 3 and 3. And as this couple found a niche and made a little business and then perhaps had a child and got a little house. And so there's something called a happiness index, which began in Bhutan. And so they measured the happiness index. And as they got into society and got their little house, the happiness index went up. Some of them then stopped. They were happy. They had what they wanted. They had a child or 2 and a house and a job. And the happiness index stayed the same. The other group wanted more. They wanted to do better. They wanted the children to go to university. So they worked harder. And they did better monetarily, but the happiness index went down. So somehow we have to get back to thinking, okay, I've got what I need. I don't need more than what I need.
Excellent. You also stress this message, this relationship, that when we take care of nature, we're actually taking care of ourselves.
Absolutely, because, you know, when you think of climate change and it's supposed to be called, I believe, climate resilience. That's what I'm told. Yeah. But I talk about climate change because the climate is changing. No question about it. And so, what did you ask?
Important, like, just to see ourselves in nature, and that when we take care of our ecosystems, we're actually taking care of we humans.
Yes, of the future. And, you know, I had a very scary I went to a very scary meeting the other day, because I've always been saying we have a window of time when, if we get together and take action, like doing the little things which may seem small, like starting programs, planting trees, clearing up litter, trying to work out ways of removing plastic from the ocean and the countryside, all these things, you know, really good things that we're doing to make the world a better, safer place. But when I went to this, they were talking about this window of time, all these people who were really studying for years the effects of climate change and loss of biodiversity. And they divided it up into different categories, which were the tipping point. Where would the tipping point come in the heating of the globe? When would the tipping point come in ecosystem destruction? When would the tipping point come in overfishing? That sort of thing. And for some of them, it was 5 years. That shocked me. And I'm trying not to believe it. I hope that it's not true. But if it is, then what's the message? We've got to roll up our sleeves and get off our butts and work. All of us.
Is it still true that you travel 300 days a year and barely stay 3 weeks in any one location? Is that still true?
Yes, it's still unfortunately true. And when people say, Jane, why don't you slow down? You're 90, nearly 91.
2 days.
Well, that means I'm closer to the end, whenever the end is, and there's so much left to do. I have to speed up, not slow down.
Yes, you've famously said when you've been asked, how long are you going to do this? And you've said...
I said, well, until I can't do it anymore.
Right.
And I don't know when that'll be.
What are you most proud of, and what most surprises you when you look back? I mean, it's interesting. I once asked Barbara Streisand when she saw herself at 29 at Funny Girl, and she looked at that picture, and I said, "What do you think when you see her?" And she goes, "I was beautiful then. Why didn't I know when I was in it that I was that beautiful? I thought I was ugly." And I thought, isn't that the truth? We don't know when we're in it the majesty of who we are. When you look back at your life, what are you most proud of? What strikes you, surprises you most?
What I'm most proud of is starting Roots and Shoots and in helping people to understand there isn't this barrier between us and the rest of the animal world. Those two things equally, I think. But what surprises me is that little girl, and growing up, and well, yes, luckily her dream came true, and she worked with animals and wanted to stay in the forest. And look what's happened. Jane Goodall Institutes in 25 countries, Roots and Shoots in 75. Gombe wouldn't be there if I hadn't been there because it was gradually being taken over by the villagers. 2 big sanctuaries which look after orphan chimpanzees. Thousands of kids inspired, as you said. And so I can only think there are 2 Janes. This one, I mean, I'm an ordinary person, right? I can make jokes. But then there's that icon out there. I have to work super hard to keep up with her.
I was speaking to Daniel of the Jane Goodall Institute, and he was saying in 2025, there are still many people that don't know the expanse of your immense work. What are the priorities today of the Jane Goodall Institute?
Priority is to make the world a better place, to try and save it, to spread Roots and Shoots, to work on, we hope that Tokori method will spread to other countries. It'll work anywhere. We know that now. And
are there other funding sources available now that USAID is no longer there?
Oh, we're finding them. And we'll have to probably go more to the corporate world and to philanthropists. And some things are coming in already.
And you said that you still have so much to do. What are your top 3 absolute goals in this next year, in your 91st year?
Well, spreading Roots and Shoots is one. Getting more money is another. And, well, there's 3 things. It's very hard being a major fundraiser. One is to keep JGI's programs going. Second, there's a Jane Goodall Legacy Fund, because I must have an endowment, because I want this work to go on when I'm dead. And you have, it's not to fund the JGIs, but it's to fill in the kind of gap that's being caused by USAID funding drying up. And then on top of that, there's in Arusha in Tanzania, They're building an amazing. It's a place. Well, it's about as big as this whole theatre, and it's going to be the whole story of Jane and Roots and Shoots and Takari, and amazing local artists making pictures and statues, and it's just the most amazing place. But all these things require money. It's my whole life has been a struggle for money.
When you had to make that decision, or the awareness that you couldn't just stay in the field with your animals, where your passion really, really was born, but you had to go out to share your iconic self with the world to raise money and raise awareness. How difficult was that for you, and do you miss it?
Well, yes, I miss it. But I couldn't do what I used to do. I couldn't run up and down the mountains anymore. But the decision, I went to this conference in 1986. I had my PhD. I could spend hours in the rainforest learning about the amazing ecosystem, with every little plant and animal has a role to play, and they're all interconnected, and also developing that really strong spiritual connection with the natural world. And I planned, there was no reason for me to stop. But at that conference, which was mainly, by then there were 6 other chimp study sites, and we had a session on conservation. It was shocking. Forests being cut down, chimp numbers dropping. We had a session on conditions in some captive situations, medical research, closest relatives in 5 foot by 5 foot cages with bars all around above and below. Used in medical research, which turns out none of it was useful. None of it was useful. And then circuses and pets. And so I left as an activist. I kind of liken it to, I call it my Damascus moment, St. Paul on the road, prosecuting the early Christians and ending up supporting them. So he doesn't know what happened. They say maybe he had an epileptic fit, which I did not, by the way. I just knew I had to try and do something. I had totally no idea what to do.
Well, as our time comes to an end here, I can't tell you what an honor it is to sit beside you and hear your story and share your story. You are emblematic of how one person can make such a difference to change the world. You're a hero, a shiro, and thank you for
But
your
remember, I have an
incredible
amazing
legacy.
team. I couldn't do it without the Jane Goodall Institute team. There's quite a lot of them here, and they're all over.
Congratulations to you all. Jane, why don't you give all these beautiful fans and friends a final message as we say goodbye?
Sorry?
Why don't you give everyone a final message while we say goodbye?
All right, well, the final message to all of you, don't forget, every single day you live, you make an impact. And please choose wisely. And don't leave the world a little bit worse or even the same, but just a little bit better.
Dr. Jane Goodall, thank you.